Are you lonesome tonight? Do you miss me tonight? Are you sorry we drifted apart? Does your man...
Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Significant Lovers. We are your hosts. My name is Mel.
And I'm Kel. And we're cousins.
Mm-hmm.
And we're here to talk about love today.
Yes. Who are we talking about?
Yeah, I guess we should just get into it. We are talking about John Adams and Abigail Adams, maiden name Smith, the second president of the United States. Now, why them? Well, I had heard that they had a good love story. Mel, you actually texted me a couple months ago, I think, and you had gone to DC and you were like, oh, I kind of want to do some presidents, I'm in the mood, or founding fathers or whatever, and you suggested them, and I had coincidentally just come across a book at a bookstore that was the letters between John Adams and Abigail Smith, and it was only $3, so I was
wow.
I'll just get it, it seems like something we could use for the podcast. And then you said that, and I was like, wait, I have this book. So here we are, we're doing John and Abigail Adams. It's cool because I read this book over the summer. I was having kind of a founding fathers summer. I was listening to podcasts about not just John Adams, I was getting into it, the other early presidents. But it's cool because when you have these older couples from, hundreds of years ago, although we might not have pictures of them, paparazzi pictures and stuff, we can read first-person accounts from them, that they actually wrote to each other and they wrote in their journals and stuff. So I feel like you get to get really close to the couple, actually. And isn't it crazy to think about people hundreds of years from now reading your messages?
I feel like that's the thing with letters. How did it become public information over time? Like when someone passes away, I guess maybe your estate is responsible for if you're a significant person, if it ends up being handed over to a museum, but it's kind of embarrassing.
It is crazy. In this case, their son Charles actually put together, I think it was Charles, put together their letters, and the family decided to put it out there. I don't think they put all of them out there, but it was a family decision to publish the parents' letters. Yeah, so it is a really, I think, a wonderful love story. I think they have some problems like other people do, but overall, I think that they're really inspiring. So the 3 words that I would use to describe John and Abigail Adams would be resilient, challenging, and loving.
Oh, we need a loving episode. There have been some depressing ones.
Yeah.
Some heartbreaking ones, which in a way are healing if you're going through it, to know that other people have as well. But it's nice to know that people have some positive love stories out there.
Yeah. Yeah. We can't do all breakup episodes, you know. And I know people might be thinking oh my gosh, founding fathers, 1700s, so problematic. How could you do an episode about this? I will say, even though John Adams did have some policies and beliefs that would definitely not fly today, I think he probably was kind of racist. Not for his time. For his time, he seemed like super woke, I guess you would say. But today, I don't think his opinions would fly. But I will say that him and his son, John Quincy Adams, who goes on to be president too, they were the only presidents out of the first 12 presidents to not own slaves, and he was against slavery, and his wife Abigail was a huge abolitionist, so can feel kind of good about that.
Yeah, I guess we got to take a little drink that we have to remember it was a different time.
It was a different time. Yep, that's on our drinking list. That will definitely come up later. Some things like that. It's kind of sad because I feel like he's a little bit overlooked or forgotten as an early president, and I don't have time to get into everything that went on in his time as president, as we don't, because this is about their relationship, not, his career. But I think he was overall pretty good person. So anyway, who was John Adams? So he was a lawyer, writer, diplomat, George Washington's vice president, and eventually the second president of the United States after George Washington. Myers-Briggs, I'm into that. People think he was an INTJ, maybe. And I can see it. He was described by Ben Franklin as, he means well for his country and is always an honest man, often a wise one, but sometimes, and in some things, absolutely out of his senses. And the historian George C. Herring said that John Adams was the most independent-minded of the founders. And even though, so he was in the Federalist Party back then, but he was somewhat a party unto himself, at times disagreeing with the Federalists as much as he did the Democratic Republicans, which was the other party. And I think he had a lot of convictions and beliefs, but he struggled with politics. It seems like he wanted to do the right thing, but that could be hard. And I think that he could be kind of persnickety, a little bit easily aggravated, and he often, at least in his private writings, seemed to think other people were dumb. I don't know if he acted that way outwardly in real life, but he did seem to think like everyone around him was kind of stupid. But I also read that he wasn't that way with his family, that he was very lovey-dovey and sweet with his wife and kids. So it's like he was this grump, but he did have like a sweet side to him. So that's a bit about his personality. You might know John Adams' cousin. Speaking of cousins, Mel and I cousins. Mm-hmm. His cousin was Samuel Adams, who's another founding father.
Of the beer.
Yes. He was a Massachusetts politician. He signed the Declaration of Independence also, and he also worked as a brewer, which is why there's a beer named after him, Sam Adams.
Yeah.
That was his cuz.
That was my dad's beer of choice for many years.
Oh, yes, yes. I feel like that's Charlie's beer of choice.
It's New England?
Yep.
Which is where we are from.
Yes, we are from Massachusetts, and that's where a lot of this story takes place. So, John Adams was born October 30th, 1735, in Braintree, Massachusetts, which is now part of Quincy, Mass. And it's very close to Boston, for reference, people that don't know. So he's a Scorpio. His father was a shoemaker, farmer, and deacon at church. Busy guy, and Braintree selectman. So politics, was in his family, and his mother managed the household, but she was apparently very strong-minded, which is maybe why he was into Abigail. ...
Oh.
Yes.
We often find that. I guess that's kind of Freudian. That, and especially with politics, we've seen that. We saw that with our JFK and Carolyn episode, that Carolyn reminded him of Jackie.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep. I do think there's something to that. It's a little disturbing sometimes, but to think about for yourself. But I think there's truth to it. John Adams. I don't know if I should call him John or Adams. It's one of those tricky things.
With the podcast, I tend to do first name.
I know.
I feel like we become familiar with them.
Yeah. I'll just say John. His parents were Puritans, so they were pretty pious, strict, Unitarian, Christian, and he definitely was pretty religious himself. I would say as he got older, later in life, he embraced more Enlightenment ideas, but I would say he was always pretty Christian. And I was kind of surprised, like I was, listening to my president's podcast this summer. I always thought that the early presidents, like the founding fathers, were all super religious, but it seems like they actually weren't as much as you would think. Excuse me, I'm recording. Is
that Charlie?
Yeah. You just opened the door. Char.
Sometimes that's like when someone walks in on you in the bathroom.
I know. I was like in the zone. Oh.
You do an accident.
It was an accident. Anyway, I'll just say John Adams and Abigail were pretty religious. His father wanted him to become a minister, and he attended Harvard. He loved books and was very studious, but he also felt like he wanted more greatness and realized he did not want to become a minister. He wanted to be important. And he, after graduating, he taught in Worcester for a bit, it's so weird, like just growing up in Massachusetts to hear that. Like, it sounds like something someone from high school would do. Like, oh yeah,
I know.
Teaches in Worcester.
It must have taken a while for them to get there before cars.
I know. It's so crazy to read about them, like, zipping all around the country because, not the country, but It must have taken a while, yeah. But he found Worcester to be too much of a backwater for the scene he was looking for, and he returned to Braintree, then Boston, to practice law, and he was admitted to the Boston bar in 1758. So he wanted distinction, he wanted to be important, he wanted to become a big-shot lawyer. Before Abigail, he fell in love with a woman named Hannah Quincy, the daughter of Colonel Josiah Quincy.
Wait. Okay, keep going.
Braintree's so-called leading citizen, and it's interesting because she is actually Abigail's second cousin.
Wait, so is this his baby mama?
No.
Oh, why did he name his son John Quincy Adams?
I know. I was thinking that. Well, guess what? Because I said that's her second cousin. Her mother is Elizabeth Quincy, so it's her family name too.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
It's her.
I know. I had the same thought.
Wait, was that her last? No, her last name's Smith.
Yeah. So her dad's last name was Smith. Her mom's last name was Quincy. Okay. So then they gave John Quincy. I know, but it is weird because he was in love with Hannah Quincy.
Yeah. Okay, that would suck too. Like your family, I guess maybe second cousins. We're always talking. Take a drink every time you debate how close cousins are.
I know, second cousin.
Second cousins might not run into each other as often as a first cousin would.
Maybe not. But I do get the sense that there weren't as many people in Massachusetts back then.
That's true. So you have to double dip in families.
I think that's actually a fact. I was talking about this the other day with my friends, and it was at the wedding. We were drunk, and we were talking about the cousin thing. I was talking about our discussion on the podcast recently about, like, would you date your 10th cousin? Would you date your, of course, but would you date your third cousin? And I was saying nobody really knows their third cousin. And my friend Bridget was like, yes, they do. I'm friends with my third cousin. And I was like, no way. No way. I bet you don't. I was like, that is not your third cousin. And then she was telling me the relation. And I guess it was her third cousin.
Really? I still don't know if I believe it.
I know. I was like, Bridget, that would be your great-great-grandparent is the shared relation there?
Yeah, I guess I'd have to see the family tree to be like, in what way? Because your second cousins, your parents are cousins. So, like, me and you, we have kids someday. Our cousins will be second cousins. Naturally, it makes sense that they would have a friendship. Mm-hmm. Well, I guess, okay, so let's say...
Well, we're close cousins, but a lot of people aren't that close to their cousins.
Yes, but okay, so let's say this makes it realistic. Our two kids that we have, they're best friends. They grow up being good friends because me and you are really good friends. If they have kids, their kids will know each other, and thus their kids will be friends with their third cousin.
That's true. So I guess if you stay really close to your cousin.
Yeah, and so I think our our grandkids will probably know each other, hopefully, if we are so lucky in this life to foster that friendship in our kids. And they hopefully won't date each other.
Hopefully, but we might not be able to stop it.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to the cousin Hannah Quincy. Apparently, she acted a bit wishy-washy when he hinted at marriage, and he hesitated. And then she ended up becoming engaged to someone else. It was one of those things where it's like they couldn't really tell how serious it was. I don't really know what happened. And then she started dating someone else and got engaged. Yeah. He was very depressed about this, though, and he threw himself into his work. And he made a vow, he wrote this in his journal, to let love and vanity be extinguished, to focus more on ambition and patriotism.
Oh, see, but love always finds you when you're not looking.
In 1759, he met Abigail Adams for the first time, but he didn't think much of her. She was only 15 when they met.
Okay.
And I think he was like 20 or something, but he was there because his friend was engaged to Abigail's sister. So he just was at the house and just met her. But there was not a connection, and that's good because she was only 15. Yeah. And I know it was like kind of normal for back then, but it's kind of a relief. That's not when their story started. But who's Abigail? Who is this Abigail? She was born Abigail Smith, November 22nd, 1744 in Weymouth, Massachusetts. So she's a Sagittarius. As for Myers-Briggs, people think she might be ISFJ, but, it's hard to tell with historical people. So she's 9 years younger than John Adams. Her father was Reverend William Smith of Weymouth. And I know we today wouldn't think that a reverend would be that big of a deal, but he was basically the most well-known guy in town. He was like the leading citizen. And her mother, Elizabeth Quincy, we mentioned earlier. Abigail was descended from some of the leading Puritan ministers of early New England. And just looking at portraits of her when she was young, I think she looked pretty. I think she had brown eyes, kind of like a sharp look to her. I was trying to think like who would play her in a movie or something. There was a mini-series actually about John Adams on HBO years ago, but I think she's kind of pretty. John Adams, I don't know what he looked like when he was young. When he was older, he was a little hefty, a little balding. But I don't know what he looked like when he was younger.
Yeah, I'm looking at pictures now. She was really pretty.
Yeah.
She's got these cute curls. Maybe Sandra Bullock? A young Sandra Bullock could play her.
She was, I wrote in my notes, basically Belle from Beauty and the Beast, because she was educated at home but very widely read, very smart. She loved learning. She knew many languages. She knew about politics, about ancient Rome and Greece. But like the time she was living in and where she was living, female education was not taken very seriously, even ridiculed. In Massachusetts, women, I mean, it was very common for women and everybody to learn how to read. Literacy was pretty high because the Puritans thought it was important that people could read the Bible, but they wouldn't be expected to know much more than that. So she really, I picture her like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. She was this like very smart girl that kind of annoyed some people. But a few years after first meeting, John somehow met Abigail again, I'm not sure how, and started courting her, as they said back then. By 1762, he was writing very loving, sweet letters to her, and she returned the affection, and they would go on long walks and have deep intellectual conversations. And they were married in fall 1764. So she was around 20 and he was 29. So it's pretty good for back then because, we did the Marie Antoinette and Louis episode, which was also in the 1700s, and they got married when they were like 14. So
yeah,
like nice. She was 20. Apparently there were comments in the neighborhood about him marrying up, that she was like a higher status than him, and he was seen as like a farm boy. Even though he was like learning to become a lawyer and such, people thought he was beneath her. He was beginning to get very political. He was writing satires of Massachusetts politicians in anonymous essays in the paper. And now there's still a colony, still part of England at this point, obviously. But he would write these papers under the pseudonym Humphrey Plowjogger. So disguising himself, and I guess he would write it in like an amusing way, sort of like this political character he came up with. It was supposed to be kind of funny, but he would like criticize politics at the same time. And then he started publishing things under his own name, and one thing that he wrote, a dissertation on the canon and feudal law, attracted a lot of notice and marked him as an intellectual leader. And I would say today it's kind of the equivalent of like writing a big piece in the New Yorker or something, and then everyone's like, oh my gosh, who wrote that? But yeah, so they're married now. 9 months after marrying, she gave birth to their first child.
Oh,
so
didn't
right
waste
away,
any time.
Yep. A daughter named Abigail that they called Nabby. Abigail and John go on to have 6 kids together. Abigail, John Quincy, Susanna, who is nicknamed Suki, Charles, Thomas, and Elizabeth, who sadly was a stillborn.
Oh.
But they do have 6 kids together in all. And I would say overall, John and Abigail were spiritually and intellectually very much equals. And it seems like he went to her as like his confidant and spoke to her about all the ideas he had about politics and such. Like she was there with him talking about it the whole time. So it's pretty cool. He's kind of rising. He's a lawyer now. He's writing all these papers. He's getting notice in Massachusetts. And in June 1774, he was chosen, along with his cousin, Sam Adams, to be the Massachusetts delegation to the First Continental Congress. So basically, it was guys gathering together in Philadelphia to figure out how they were going to break off from Britain and form a new country. It was a big deal because it was basically treason, to like break off from England.
Yeah.
They had to be very secretive about it. It was very high stakes. So he's invited to this. He doesn't leave immediately, but this is going to mean that he's going to have to go to Philadelphia, which is pretty far away.
And he can't bring the family with him?
He can't bring the family with him. I'm not sure why.
Is he allowed to tell the family that this is what he's doing?
Yeah, I think they know this is what he's doing. But this is the start of many years, very long stretches of time, when he is away from his family, who's back in Massachusetts.
That's tough.
He will be in Philadelphia, and then in Europe as an envoy in France, and then later the Netherlands. And in total, coming up, they will be apart for 11 years.
Oh my gosh.
I know.
Too long.
He will go home. He will go home. I know. He will go home sometimes to visit and then leave again and then come back and then leave. But like if you add up all the time he was away, it will be 11 years long distance.
And he probably didn't come home. Maybe he stayed for larger chunks of time, but back then if you're traveling, you have to get on a boat. You gotta like get on a horse and buggy. It's not that easy to just be
No. He would come home for months, but then leave again for like years.
Oh, God bless Abigail. That's tough.
I know. So this is obviously a really extreme situation, but it inspired me to ask our listeners on Patreon, because we have polls over there, about long distance. And I asked, what are your thoughts and experiences with long distance relationships? And okay, so there are 4 options. You could say, I've done long distance and would do it again if necessary. I haven't done long distance, but I would if necessary. I have done long distance, it would never again. Or I never have and never would do long distance. So the top answer, 39%, was I've done long distance and would do it again and if necessary. The second one was, with most responses, was I haven't done it, but I would if I had to. The third most results was I have done it and would never again. And then 7% of people said I never have and never would do long distance. So 39 plus 29.
Yeah.
So like about 70% said that they would do it, either again or for the first time.
Wow. That's crazy that this is a really open-minded bunch of people, our patrons. Like that the smallest percentage of people are the people who said, I've never done it and never will. Like at least a lot of the people who say they won't do it have had bad experiences. So they're basing it off of that.
Yeah, 25% did say, I have and would never again. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to read some responses from people, like comments, but it's interesting to think about, like, I do think that the line would never again, or like you wouldn't, you could take that either way. Like, let's say your partner gets a job in a faraway land or something. And so is saying you wouldn't, does that mean you telling them like, no, we're not? And just like hoping they won't do the thing that would make them be long distance, or maybe you making a decision that would make your relationship stay close together, or does that mean breaking up? You know what I mean? Like there's a couple ways. I mean, sometimes if someone really wants to go far away, there could be no other option if you can't come to an agreement.
Yeah, I mean, we've had couples that have definitely broken up on this podcast about
so much.
Not agreeing on where to live, which is huge.
Yes.
I think that's one thing. See, the thing about long distance for me is like I would have to have an end date in sight. Like I could do it maybe for a year, 2 years if I knew that there was some important reason why we had to be long distance, but I would honestly be more inclined to move than be long distance in my current relationship because I see my boyfriend all the time. Same with you. You live with your boyfriend. And our relationship has just been founded on that. So, like, when we're not together, we don't really communicate that often because I know I'm going to see him soon. And sometimes it is hard when we don't, like, if we're both home for the holidays or for whatever reason, we're not that communicative because we're not used to that. So I don't know if I would ever really want to be long distance.
Yeah, it totally depends. Some people, as I'm going to read in the comments, like some people are really good at it. And some people not into that. It's, everyone's different. I have done a long distance relationship. I mean, for a while it wasn't that far. It was like Boston to Maine, so not that far. But, when I studied abroad, it was only a couple of months, but it was hard, especially being different time zones.
Yeah.
I do think having an end date helps, and it's kind of weird to get real about a past relationship, but I think we didn't know when it was going to end, or like we didn't, and we were young too. I think it depends where you are in your life too. Like it can be kind of scary to make a move or something for a relationship when you don't really know if this is the one, or you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. In John and Abigail's case, I mean, they are married and they're also both very religious, so they're not gonna like get divorced over this, I don't think. And it's the 1700s, so it was a different time, I think. But
I wonder how much of a choice he gave her. Like, I feel like in relationships you do have to make these decisions together. I'm sure she probably would have rather him stayed home, like, but I wonder if he even asked for her opinion.
I know, and that's something we don't really know today. But anyway, I'm going to read a couple of comments. Peyton said, I've ended up doing long distance. I hope this is okay reading it. I've ended up doing long distance with every BF I've had, LOL. Me and my partner now have been together for 3 years and long distance for 1. It sucks and it's annoying, but with the right person, I think you can really make it work as long as you're both willing to put in the effort and there's an eventual plan to be in the same place. Yes. I think that's key, the plan to be in the same place eventually. Amy said, I worked on cruise ships for 10 years and was separated by ships from boyfriends. In my experience, absence does not make the heart grow fonder. Absence is a recipe for someone straying, and it's difficult to maintain/grow a relationship and connection when you don't have common experiences for long periods. 0 out of 10 would not recommend.
Oh, no. Ooh. I hope there's no one listening who's like newly in a long distance relationship and they're oh no.
Well, John and Abigail will be inspiration for you. And it was way, 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 way harder back then than now. So
yeah.
I hope you're inspired by their strength. Victoria said, I did long distance with my ex for 3 years and I moved after I finished college. We broke up within 6 months after that. Allison said, my high school to college relationship on and off for 7 years was long distance. It was young, first love. I think it's doable in my relationship now where there is so much more trust and equity. Yeah. I mean, yeah, I would say in my current relationship, if we had to for some reason, I would, but hopefully that doesn't. I mean, I work remotely. I don't know why that would happen.
I have no idea what circumstance would. You guys are both from the same area, too.
I know. What could it possibly be?
I have no idea. Like,
this is a good thought experiment. I truly do not know, Mel. I cannot think of a reason that would happen.
I don't know.
But that's kind of nice. I think, you know, when I was younger, things were so much more like turbulent, and I often found myself dating people that didn't live that close to. So, I don't know. Anyway, let's get into it. Their actual relationship year to year. So we're going to read their letters together, back and forth. And I just got to say, I tried Googling this. I searched everywhere for this. And I feel like I'm the first person to ever ask this question on the internet. I could be wrong, but I have not seen anybody write this or anything. But throughout all the letters between John and Abigail Adams, they are very sweet to each other, very loving. They say, like, my dearest, yours, 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 forever yours. They say things like that. But they never write the words, I love you. Isn't that weird? Why is that? I was wondering.
Did you find out?
No. I mean, I had the book, you know, but then I found a digital version and I searched it. I searched the words, I love you. I even just searched love you. It didn't come up. I was wondering, could it be because a few times that they did write it, those letters just so happened to be destroyed or not saved? Possibly. Or did people just not write that back then? I don't know.
Yeah.
But don't you think that's weird?
I feel like I would sign it with every single letter. Any card, even any card, like birthday card or anything that I give anyone very dear to me, I always write I love you in it.
Me too. I just thought that was very odd.
Maybe they were, you know, playing it cool.
Maybe. I will get to this, but John was very paranoid that people would read their letters especially when he was in Europe later, because he was like a public figure of this revolution and such. But I still don't know why that. I mean, they still write a lot of things in their letters, so I don't know why they wouldn't write I love you. I don't know. Yeah, maybe that wasn't in fashion or something. I don't know. But yeah, I have not found anybody else on the internet talking about that, which is weird. In the letters, she often signed them Portia, which was the wife of the Roman Republican patriot Lucius Julius Brutus. They were both very inspired by ancient Rome, and John would call her Portia back. I think he would call himself some nicknames too sometimes, but she seemed very committed to the Portia nickname.
That's so cultured of her.
I know. One of John's letters did fall into British hands and was published in a newspaper. So he does censor himself a lot because he's in fear that will happen again. So maybe, as I said, that's maybe why he didn't write I love you, but I still don't get it.
Well, what's embarrassing about that?
I know, right? I know.
Maybe so people didn't say it a lot back then.
They didn't. I don't know. He often doesn't reveal people's names and isn't specific about what's going on. Doesn't share like confidential information about the war in Congress, but he does talk about it a little bit. He often writes that he's annoyed with the men around him and complains and expresses envy and annoyance, especially towards Ben Franklin and the attention he gets. He really did not like Benjamin Franklin, which is funny because, I don't know, I feel like usually you hear about people loving him. So the letters, I'm starting in June 1774, so he hasn't left for Philadelphia yet, but he is in York, Maine, which is pretty close to where I live now. And in the letter, he complains that all the young lawyers are making a lot of money, still in British pounds, but he's still poor, and he admits that he spent a lot, but he mentions that people are richer in the country and suggests they move somewhere cheaper. And I just couldn't believe that because it's like still so relatable more than 200 years later. Like, oh, it's so much cheaper out here. Yeah. Maybe we should move. I just can't believe that. In another letter really soon after, he debates if he should just give up law and instead just be a farmer at home and teach his kids. So he does that a lot. Like even though he wants to be this great man, he sometimes is like, maybe I should just be a farmer. You know, this is too much.
A simple life.
Yeah. Around this time, 1774, it seems like she's either busier than him or he didn't have her letters or maybe they weren't saved or something because he's writing every single day and she's not. And he's working on a case in Maine and she's presumably busy running the house with the kids and the garden. And he doesn't mention anything that she's written, so it seems like he's just writing to her with no response.
I feel like that's so much worse than double texting.
I know.
Double sending a letter.
I know. He writes a lot about things that bother him with work and the newspapers and politics, things like that. And you can tell because he writes all these philosophical things. I just think that he really did think of her as his intellectual equal, and I could be wrong, but I feel like it wasn't that common back then, so it's nice to see. I feel like even today sometimes men are like, oh, you wouldn't get it or something. So it's just cool to see him going on and on for pages, honestly, to her. So I don't know. Okay, but then July 1774, he goes to Philadelphia to be part of the Continental Congress, the rebellion against the crown. And he writes to her, "The letters I have written or may write, my dear, must be kept secret or at least shown with great caution. ... Kiss my dear babes for me. Your John Adams." And then he has a P.S. and he says he forgot to tell a story about asking someone for tea, and she said, "No, we aren't serving tea anymore, only coffee." I think because of the taxation things going on with Britain, and he declares that tea must be universally renounced and that he's had coffee every day since.
Oh.
I know. It's really interesting, you know, how England loves their tea, and I mean, people still drink tea in America, but overall, people drink coffee more often, I'd say. And I think it's because of that. Yeah,
it became like out of fashion, as you said earlier.
Yes, it was like patriotic to drink coffee instead of tea.
Wait, that's so true. That's so interesting. I do love
crazy?
Tea. I'm a tea drinker.
I know. You are tea. I'm definitely coffee. I mean, I have tea sometimes, but I love my coffee.
I'm a loyalist.
It's actually going to be a lot about drinks in this podcast. August 1774. We still don't have... She has written letters, but I just haven't found them, like, worthy enough to read yet. But there will be Abigail letters. August 1774, John ends his letter to her. "I have kept a few minutes by way of a journal, which shall be your entertainment when I come home. But we have had so many persons and so various characters to converse with, and so many objects to view, that I have not been able to be so particular as I wish I could. I am, with the tenderest affections and concerns, your wandering John Adams." So sweet.
I wouldn't like to hear you're wandering.
I know. I think he just means, like, I'm away from home.
I know.
Like, I'm a wandering soul. I don't know. Not all who wander are lost. In her next letters, I just thought she was very sweet. She signed it, your most affectionate friend, your most affectionate Abigail Adams.
Oh.
And then she often starts them, my dearest friend.
Oh, yeah. See, I think there's something so romantic about in a relationship referring to your romantic partner as your friend. Like, that's when it's like a true level of intimacy.
Yeah, it is really sweet. They always call each other my dearest friend.
That's
like,
cute.
Oh, I know. Okay,
PR relationship?
PR? No, these were private letters, Mel.
True.
Are you kidding me?
No, I mean, maybe, like, they really were friends, but
they're just friends.
Yeah.
Where did the 6 kids come from?
That's why they don't say I love you.
Oh, maybe. No.
I'm
surprised. I refuse to believe that.
With all that time, I guess he did come back. I was going to say with all that time away that they could make 6 kids, but I guess.
I mean, yeah.
The kids probably didn't know him that well.
I know.
Did he write letters to the kids too?
He did. I think he mostly wrote them to John Quincy, the oldest son. Mm-hmm. But I think he didn't write to the others as much as he should have, probably. Unfortunately. September 1774, British soldiers removed gunpowder and other military supplies from a magazine near Boston. This was known as the powder alarm. It caused a reaction and widespread alarm, and there were rumors spread that blood had been shed, and American patriots feared war was imminent. Thousands of militiamen marched toward Boston and Cambridge, and mobs forced loyalists and some government officials to seek protection from the British Army. It's basically like riots are starting, people are freaking out, and though the alarm proved to be false, it was kind of like a dress rehearsal for what was going to occur soon. And John was curious about what was happening in Boston and later fearful because they're very close to Boston. I mean, they're basically in the Boston area. That's like where Quincy is. In a letter, Abigail wrote that she wished most sincerely that there was not a slave in the province. I just wanted to mention that because I do think she was a great woman and they needed people like that back then, you know.
Yeah.
John writes about the Congress and says that 50 gentlemen meeting together, all strangers, are not acquainted with each other's languages, ideas, views, designs. They are therefore jealous of each other, fearful, timid, skittish. It's just funny to think of the founding fathers like that. And he wrote that he's weary to death with Congress, and he thinks everybody thinks very highly of themselves, and it's impossible to move forward with any decisions. He seems to be writing more often, but he writes that he wishes he could write 12 letters every day.
Aww.
Just sweet, yeah. I mean, that was a lot of work to have to write a letter.
I mean, yeah, when you think about it. I mean, at least, you said this kind of earlier, but when you're long distance now, you communicate throughout the day. So you can, like, you know, a little thing that happens. Oh,
you can send pictures.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, FaceTime.
People don't drink tea anymore. You just send that quick text off the moment it happens. But back then, any little thing throughout your day, you have to save it and remember it in order to put it in your letter.
Yeah. April 1775. I know, it would be. I feel bad for Abigail. I feel bad for him too, but like he's definitely really busy. Yeah. I heard that the Congress, it was basically all day and night. Like they would start at I think 10 a.m. and be meeting until it wasn't that long actually, like 4 or 5 or so, but then they would have dinners every night. It was like a lot of socializing too, so it was just like all day every day he was with people. But then she's just at home. I mean, she has the kids and she has like her nearby family, but it's gotta be lonely. April 1775, the first shots of the war, the Revolutionary War, happened at Lexington and Concord. It's funny, some of the podcasts I listen to, people called it Concord. No. John is obviously not there for the start of the war, and it's mostly happening in Massachusetts. And so he's writing letters being like, what's happening? What's going on? Tell me everything. June 1775, he mentioned that Colonel Washington appeared at Congress in his uniform and was advising them on military matters. And then in July, he wrote to Abigail, "It gives me more pleasure than I can express to learn that you sustain with so much fortitude the shocks and terrors of the time. You are really brave, my dear. You are a heroine, and you have no reason to be." And then he ends the letter, I am forever yours.
Oh, that's so sweet.
I know. So George Washington, at this point he's just a general in the war, but he will be the president. He stopped by the Adams house and Abigail hosted him. So John wasn't there. But she wrote to John, I was struck with General Washington. You had prepared me to entertain a favorable opinion of him, but I thought the half was not told to me. Dignity with ease and complacency, the gentleman and the soldier. Modesty marks every line and feature of his face.
Oh.
I was like, oh, is she into him?
Kind of sounds like it.
I know.
I was struck by him.
I know. Modesty marks every line and feature of his face.
Yeah. Again, we have to remember that's a different time. Who describes someone like that now?
I know. I don't know. I guess she was writing to her husband, too, so she had to not be too complimentary. But it seems like she liked him. Abigail makes a complaint to John that all his letters seem to be written so quickly that they don't leave any room for a social feeling.
That's so funny.
She wrote, they let me know you exist, but some of them contain scarcely 6 lines. I want some sentimental effusions of the heart.
Oh my God, that's so... I feel like that happens now too. It's like, put some emojis in there.
I know.
Add some emotion. This is
not emotional enough. Yeah.
Yeah.
Some things never change. She writes lots about what's going on with the war to him. And I wrote just like in a sticky note on a letter around this time, I just wrote, he really loves her, trusts her, values her opinion, confides in her, she's his person.
Aww.
So I just had that thought. He does return home finally, July 1775, but briefly because he returns in August to Philadelphia. And she writes to him, the return of thee, my dear partner, after 4 months' absence is a pleasure I cannot express. And then things take a turn for the worse for the Adams family. September 1775, everyone around her in Boston, Braintree, is sick and dying of dysentery and living in a lot of fear of the war. In October, her mother dies and she's distraught. And she signs the letter, Your distressed Portia. And then John's brother and their servant Patty died too. And Abigail was actually so distraught about Patty that I thought that she was her daughter. I actually wrote in my notes, like, their daughter Patty died. And then I realized later, like, wait a sec, they don't have a daughter named Patty. But it was their servant, I guess.
Yeah. But I'm sure, she must have been, like, almost like a member of the family.
Yeah. Which I thought was kind of touching. I mean, it's really tragic that she died. Well, all of them died. But I thought that was touching that she cared that much about her.
Yeah.
And was writing about how lost and how heavy her heart is, and she's just breaking down with all the sickness and death. But then she concludes the letter, still I have many blessings left, many comforts thankful for, and rejoice in. So she's staying strong. In October, John writes to her that he's very afraid for her safety and that the British officials could read their letters, and he writes, they may peep. I just thought that was funny. They may peep. In another letter he wrote, if I ever come here, meaning Philadelphia, again, I must bring you with me. I could live here pleasantly if I had you with me. And then he says, what if we should? Let me please myself with the thought. I feel like I so relate. I'm always like, what if we lived here?
I wonder how long it took for the letters to get to each other.
I should have figured that out. I'm not sure, Mel.
Well, I guess we don't know. I mean, even if we
That's true. We only have the date. Yeah, we only have the date it was written on it. I think it could be weeks or a month, maybe, or I don't know. Maybe less. I can't really tell. I thought it was sweet. He signed the letter, yours, yours, yours.
Oh.
So crazy that we're reading this hundreds of years later. It's weird. I was thinking about this. Think about this man, actually sitting down at his desk. It's like wood, like a real person with a pen and paper and writing this.
Yeah, and he's not thinking anything of it. It's just a letter to his wife. And then years later, there's 2 girls in their rooms with microphones. They don't even know what those are.
I know.
Recording a podcast, talking about it.
How would we even explain what that is?
I wonder if they'd be, a little red in the face over that.
Probably. Sorry, John. Later in October 1775, she wrote, My pen is always freer than my tongue. I have written many things to you that I suppose I never could have talked, which I find interesting. And she's still very sad about Patty, which is sweet. And then John wrote back, if I could write as well as you, my sorrow would be as eloquent as yours, but upon my word, I cannot. So, he can't express his grief, I guess.
Yeah.
On November 4th, 1775, he writes about Mrs. Hancock, so that would be John Hancock's wife, and how in a crowd she's totally silent as a lady ought to be. John... But whether her eyes are so penetrating and her attention so quick to the words, looks, gestures, sentiments of the company, as yours would be, saucy as you are this way, I won't say. So he's calling her saucy.
Interesting. That's coming across like a little flirty with
I know.
Mrs. Hancock.
I think it is. No, I think he's saying Abigail's flirty. He's saying she's silent. But whether her eyes and her looks or whatever are as saucy as yours, I won't say. So,
but I won't say like
he is kind of hinting that like Mrs. Hancock is saucy, but he's also calling Abigail saucy, which is kind of funny. But yeah, he's losing some points for saying a lady ought to be silent.
Yeah, it was a different time.
Different time. I know. Abigail's been asking him to write to her father and sister, and he basically says, I wish I could, but I'm way too busy, and I need exercise.
What?
I thought that was funny. He's just saying, like, I'm too busy to write to them, and I really need to exercise. Oh. November, he was also appointed the Chief Justice of the Massachusetts Superior Court, but he actually never filled that office. But he was offered the job if he wanted it. Abigail wrote to him, I have been like a nun in a cloister ever since you went away, and have not been to any other house besides my father and sisters, except once to Colonel Quincy. My evenings are lonesome and melancholy.
Oh,
I know. That kind of touched me in a way. I was like, wow, I guess people have always had no life sometimes.
Yeah.
I feel that way sometimes.
I feel like there was less to do, though. Like, I feel like it would be hard to have a social life.
I don't know why I have this vision that back then people were like always with their neighbors or something.
Yeah,
like,
I think that too.
With the family, and they have like a little dance, and then they're all by the fire.
Yeah, I think that too. And like people are coming in and out.
Yeah. Maybe not. So they're writing, all throughout they're writing a lot about politics and what the new country should be and what's going to happen. And she writes about his secrecy because he's so paranoid that people are going to read their letters. She writes, I think you are more cautious than you need to be, which is kind of funny. John returns to Massachusetts for Christmas, but then he goes back to Philly not long after.
Ugh.
March 1776, she writes her now famous letter that is beloved by feminists all over. It's like on merch and stuff. It says, and by the way, in your new code of laws, which I suppose it will be necessary for you to make, I desire you would remember the ladies and be more generous and favorable to them than your ancestors. So just that remember the ladies is a quote of hers that people talk about a lot. And she asks if men could give up the harsh title of master for the more tender and endearing one of friend.
Oh, that's cute.
She writes another letter and says, I miss my partner.
They really do seem like equals, and I feel like he really does value her opinion.
Yes. However, a month after she wrote it, John responds to her Remember the Ladies letter. He basically laughs it off and writes, I cannot but laugh, and you are so saucy.
Oh, God.
And depend upon it, we know better than to repeal our masculine systems.
Jeez.
I know. And she fires back. She writes like this whole paragraph. I cannot say that I think you very generous to the ladies, for whilst you are proclaiming peace and goodwill to men, emancipating all nations, you insist upon retaining an absolute power over wives, but you must remember that arbitrary power is like most other things which are very hard, very liable to be broken, and notwithstanding all your wise laws and maxims, we have it in our power, and not only to be free ourselves, but to subdue our masters, and without violence throw both your natural and legal authority at our feet.
Good for her. Like, no, she's not being saucy. Why would that be flirty, you idiot? Think for a second.
You are so saucy.
God, did he respond to that?
Not really. Not really. I know. She also writes that his letters have been much shorter and not acknowledging everything she said. Oh, yeah. So he didn't, I think he just dropped the remember the ladies thing. And she writes, either you haven't gotten my letters or you want us to be more concise, but I'm not going to take the hint. I paraphrase, but she basically is like, I don't know if you want me to write shorter letters, but I'm not going to.
I love that.
I know. She's cool. April 28th, 1776, John writes to her, is there no way for two friendly souls to converse together, although the bodies are 400 miles off? Yes, by letter, but I want a better communication. I want to hear you think or to see your thoughts. The conclusion of your letter makes my heart throb more than a cannonade would.
Who said that? He did?
John. Just sweet.
Well, that's the thing about long distance. I feel like for me, like, physical touch is, like, such a nice thing, like just being able to not say anything and cuddle at the end of the day. And that would be so hard. You're only reliant on your words, and if someone's not a wordsmith, like that's really difficult.
Luckily for them, I think they both were wordsmiths.
Sounds like he was a little lazy with his words though.
Yeah,
even though he's the one there kind of complaining.
I still think, because I read their letters, I still think he did write pretty long letters, but I do think he spent a lot of time talking about the Congress. Maybe she was like, okay.
Yeah.
That's enough. Like, what else? I don't know. But despite this sweet letter where he says, like, I want a better communication, I want to see you, I want to hear you, I was getting this sense in May 1776 that she was getting a little annoyed with him. She started a letter saying, I don't feel like writing. And then he... Also that he hasn't been writing enough, and said that it's too tiring to travel home for short times.
I'm sure it was a long journey.
Very tough. Yes.
Uh-oh. Are they going to make it through?
John wrote to her May 17th, 1776. In one or two of your letters, you remind me to think of you as I ought. So she keeps writing, like, think of me. And he writes... Be assured, there is not an hour of the day which I don't think of you as I ought. That is, with every sentiment of tenderness, esteem, and admiration. So, I did think that was nice. Like, I am thinking of you all the time. He writes another letter in May saying that among all the disappointments in life, nothing has affected him as much as the choice blessing of a wife as her. And he writes, I read again and again your charming letters. I want to take a walk with you in the garden, to go over the common, the plain, the meadow. I want to take Charles in one hand and Tom in the other and walk with you, Nabby on your right hand and John upon my left.
Aww.
Which is very sweet. She hasn't gotten his letters recently, though, or they're really delayed, because she writes May 27th, around the same time he's writing this, and says, what can be the reason I have not heard from you since the 20th of April, and now 'tis the 27th of May?
Oh, wow.
I know.
It's a really long time. I'd be nervous. Like, are they still alive?
Yeah, I know. A whole month.
That's crazy.
But he has been writing letters, so I think they're just super delayed. Abigail writes that Charlestown, the neighborhood of Boston, has been reduced to ashes. There's a constant roar of the cannon she hears all night. And she says they can't eat, drink, or sleep. Basically, Boston is a war zone right now, which is crazy. And I do find it, I know he's, like, doing important work, but I do find it a bit nuts that he would leave his wife and family there.
Yeah, you know? I wonder if there's, like, any, not to be, like, sexist about this, but, like, if there's any man there helping her. Not that she necessarily needs a man, but, like, I'd be scared.
No, I know. I think she does have family members around, both of their families, but, yeah, I would be scared, too. I hope she's not just home alone. Because, yeah, like, war is really, really dangerous. Like, some man could just come in the house and, you know, people take advantage of situations, so it is really scary. But I think she did have the family there. June 1776, John was named the president of the Board of War and Ordnance. And then I just wrote that he ends his letter, my love everywhere. July 2nd, 1776, Congress votes for independence and approves the Declaration of Independence. I read that John Adams was actually asked to write the Declaration of Independence, he said he was too busy, so that job went to Thomas Jefferson.
Wow.
It's kind of crazy. So he could have had that honor, but...
What an opportunity to turn down.
I know. But yes, he signs the Declaration of Independence. I think it was signed 2 days later on July 4th. 4th of July, you know. July 20th, it's funny, because even though all of this is going on, they're still having their relational problems and issues and stuff. He gets upset in a letter to her and says he feels like her and his friends have forgotten about him. He writes, "This has been a dull day to me. I waited the arrival of post with so much solitude and impatience." And then he kept writing, "If you were too busy to write, I hoped that some kind hand would have been found to let me know something about you. Do my friends think that I have been a politician for so long to have lost all feeling? Do they suppose I have forgotten my wife and children? Or are they so panic-struck with the loss of Canada as to be afraid to correspond with me? Or have they forgotten that you have a husband and your children a father? What have I done or admitted to do that I should be thus forgotten and neglected in the most tender and affecting scene of my life? Aww. Don't mistake me. I don't blame you." And then he goes on to say, "I know you're busy, but 20 other people could have written to me." So,
like, we've all had those times where we're like, wait, does everybody hate me right now?
I know.
I think they say, like, if you think everybody hates you, take a nap.
Really?
If you hate everybody, eat something. Oh. And if you hate yourself, take a shower.
Oh.
So maybe he should have taken a little nap. Maybe he was tired.
Maybe.
But maybe people weren't writing. But there is literally a war going on. Like,
true. Yeah.
Not everything is about you.
I know. I do. I just love, I don't know why, I love relating to people from like hundreds of years ago.
I know.
Yeah, you do have those days. It's like, wow, no one texted me about hanging out this weekend.
Yeah.
No one has asked me what's up with me in forever. No one cares.
I know. I hate those times when, like, for whatever reason, I'm not on my phone all day, and then I go to look at it, and I'm like, oh my god, there's like no messages.
I know. One time I turned my phone off for a couple days because I wanted to, like, disconnect. And when I turned it on, I think there was nothing.
Oh, my God.
That was so sad.
Yeah. That's funny. He's kind of a little saucy there, too.
He is. He is. He also writes that he suspects the family has smallpox and she's trying to hide it. I think that was actually true. And then she responds, "I have no doubt that my dearest friend is anxious to know how Portia does." Third person. She writes that she took the kids to get inoculated, which is very new science at the time. And she also mentions how the king's arms were taken down from the State House, and everything bearing the royal arms was burned in King Street.
Wow.
So it's pretty crazy. They're throwing out everything related to England. And she ends her letter, "I am forever yours."
Aww.
So this time they're coming up with a constitution, writing that. That's what's happening with Congress. August 18th, 1776, he wrote to her, Let me have my farm, family, and goose quill, and all the honors and offices of this world has to bestow may go to those who deserve them better and desire them more. I covet them not. There are very few people in this world with whom I can bear to converse. This has made me a recluse and will one day make me a hermit. I'd rather build a stone wall than be the first prince of Europe or the first general or first senator in America. I just think that's crazy, because, like, how... I don't know if he's just being humble, but he becomes the president.
Yeah.
Like, how... I hope this is... I don't know if he's just saying this, or... I do know that he does want to be a great man, too, but I do find it really admirable. I feel like we don't really have politicians like that anymore, that they're, like, not really looking for recognition or attention or glory or anything. And I don't know. It's cool. But I do think he secretly does at the same time.
Yeah, well, because what does he mean by great man? Because
I know.
He could have been, you said, a minister, which he could have considered that to be a noble pursuit in his life. Like, he could have been great just on a smaller scale.
Yeah. They write more sweet, pained letters about missing each other. There was a funny back and forth exchange when they realized that John had ordered tea. Hang on, I thought they weren't drinking tea anymore. But he had ordered tea to be sent to her, but it was accidentally mailed to Sam Adams' wife.
Oh, that's funny.
John was so vexed, quote, that he had to order another canister of tea, because I think it was really expensive. And he tells Abigail to write to Mrs. Sam Adams and let her know that the tea was for her and ask if she'll send it to her or, like, what's left of it.
Oh, no, that's terrible.
I know.
She probably got the tea and she goes, hey, that was a nice gesture. What a surprise. Your cousin sent me this. That's sweet.
Yep. Okay, so September 1776, him and Ben Franklin and others go to New York to meet British peace commissioners to negotiate for peace, but I guess the British were only authorized to offer peace after American submission, so the war is not over. And John writes a letter where he talks about corruption going on. I'm guessing because everything is kind of in shambles right now, and a lot of these guys are just being really corrupt, being bribed, and things like that. And he writes, I'm ashamed of the age I live in. Yeah. October 76, he returns home for a 9-week visit. So that's a good amount.
Yeah.
But then he returns to Philadelphia. British are still
I guess
fighting.
I don't get why the family couldn't be based in Philly.
I don't know. I know. I feel like historians don't really know why either. I don't know if it was just like, oh, well, someone needs to keep the farm going or something, or I don't know why. Or he just thought it wasn't, maybe none of the men had their families with them. I don't know what the deal was, but it is strange. Because he even says, like, I wish you would be here with me. Like, or I would live here with you. So, like, why don't they just go? I don't know. Yeah, so the British are still fighting some states. They occupy New Jersey. March 1777, he writes, this city, meaning Philly, is a dull place in comparison to what it was, because a lot of people had fled to the country because of the war. And he says the remaining people are chiefly Quakers who are dull as beetles. I know. He writes again about preferring the delightness of his garden to the dominion of the world. And he says, I have nothing of Caesar's greatness in my soul. Okay.
Humble. Maybe it's because Abigail, his wife, likes when someone has a little bit of modesty on their face.
True. Yes. Modesty in the lines of his face. Yeah, she's like, stop being so full of yourself, John.
Yeah.
May, Abigail writes to him, "'Tis 10 days, I believe, since I wrote you a line, yet not 10 minutes passed without thinking of you."
Oh, that's so sweet. Do you mind if we take a little bathroom break?
Oh, yes.
All right.
It's a good time. Take a break. Okay, so she writes this sweet thing, like, not 10 minutes passed without thinking of you. But interestingly, around this time, so it's spring 1777, there are letters that Abigail wrote that seem kind of flirtatious to this Massachusetts statesman, James Lovell. I didn't even know about this. Like, I thought it was all done with research, and then I just kind of kept...
That always happens.
I just kept going.
Yeah.
And then I came across this, and I couldn't believe it, because there's these letters where she's writing to him, and she even calls herself Portia to this James guy, and he calls her Portia too, which, like, what the heck? That was her nickname for John.
And who is this jabroni? Like, what?
I don't know.
Is he married? Single?
He's married.
Oh.
I'll talk more about him later. Okay. But it does seem like she's writing to him very excitedly, very sweetly. She's not saying, like, my lover or anything, but it just seems like she's really loving his letters and stuff. So I don't know what the heck is going on. But we'll come back to that. Also in May, while this is going on, John's writing her letters. He's talking about all these philosophical ideas. And then I just thought it was funny. After all of this, talking about government, blah, 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 he has this whole paragraph where he's complaining about the alcohol available in Philly. And he says that wine is too expensive, there's no cider, and the beer there is wretchedly bad. And he says, in short, I can get nothing that I can drink. I believe I shall be sick from this cause alone. And he writes that expensive rum and bad water won't do in this hot climate. So this really got me thinking, because people have said that, you know, in places where water was bad, they would drink beer and such. So were people actually slightly drunk, like, all the time?
I know. I feel like it was a low alcohol percentage.
That's true.
But if you're drinking it all day, I'd imagine maybe a little bit.
Interesting.
I know, that always confused me because, like, that would still dehydrate you, I'd imagine.
I know. August 77, Abigail writes about how it's been almost 13 years since they first met.
Wow.
And she writes about how hard it is to be separated from him, but considers it her sacrifice for her country. John writes again about the alcohol situation, and I thought it was crazy. He said that wine was $10 a bottle, which is nuts because it's 1777.
That must have been so expensive.
Wine can be $10 a bottle today.
Yeah, a cheap bottle, but still.
Yeah.
Yeah, but honestly, I can go to the bodega downstairs and get a $6 bottle of wine.
I know. Isn't that crazy? It must have been really, really, really expensive.
Yeah.
See, I think the tea was like that same situation too, where it was really expensive. So I think that's why he was so upset about it being sent to his cousin's wife. But
yeah, that makes sense.
When he says again he wishes he could get a cider, and I love that because I love cider too. I'm actually drinking a cider right now. September, she ends her letter. Good night, friend of my heart, companion of my youth, husband and lover. Sweet. That October 77, it's been 3 years of separation, I think, if you add it up. John, then, November 77, is elected a joint commissioner to treat with the French government. So, France and England are enemies, hate each other, and basically France is trying to make deals with America. They do help in the Revolutionary War because they want to take down England too. And so there's just a lot of negotiations going on, things about like loans to America and like all this stuff, international relations. So he is asked to go to France, and he does. I do wonder, we don't know, we don't have it written down because he goes home, I think, first, but like, did he talk about this with Abigail? Was she okay with this? Did he ask her? We don't know. But for some reason, she doesn't go with him. But he does bring their son, John Quincy Adams, to France.
Oh, and how old is he at this point?
I think he's school age. Let's see when he was born. He was born 1767. Oh, so he's like 11? Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, he's 11 years old. And
that must have been exciting for him.
Yeah, I know.
Hasn't really gotten to spend that much time with his dad, so.
Yeah. And I think this is crazy because they've sailed to France, and it's crossover episode because we have an episode about Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette, and that is who the king and queen were at the time when he goes.
Wow.
Isn't that crazy? He's staying there and he meets them.
That was a really... Oh, no way.
Yeah.
Damn. Yeah, that was a really good episode.
It's a Patreon episode.
Oh, it's Patreon.
Yes.
Yep. If you guys like the podcast and you want double the amount of couples to listen to, shameless little plug for the Patreon right now.
It was kind of a funny episode. I mean, the end was dark, but...
A little raunchy.
Yeah, it was raunchy. Very raunchy. Interestingly, so the book that I bought, that one that was $3 of their letters, it was a used book, and for some reason, around this time, the previous owner of this book drew a giant X through one of Abigail's letters and edited it. It was almost like they thought the transcription was wrong or something. It was so strange.
Wait, that's
I don't know what was up with that. I know.
I don't know why. That, like, spooks me out.
It was very weird. And the person added, like, a sticky note, too, where they added, like, a line to it.
There was a sticky note in it?
Yeah. It was very odd.
Was that the only thing the person wrote?
Yes. It was just this one section.
And X'd it out.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Very weird. I know. I don't know what their problem was.
But what does the letter say?
Honestly, nothing that remarkable. I didn't even think it was worth putting in the book. It was just a typical letter, like talking about what's going on at home and that I miss you and things like that. So it was very weird.
Who is this person that would be doing
know!
that?
Who did that? I guess that's why it was $3. During John's time in France, they hardly hear from each other. Like, at all. From February to June, John gets no letters from her.
Wow.
That's such a long time.
That's a really long time.
No contact whatsoever. Yeah. And it's not that she's not trying. I think the letters are just not making it. Ships are being seized. People are stealing his mail for some reason. So he doesn't hear from her for months. And then she eventually writes that she hasn't heard from him in 4 months. So I think some letters make it eventually, but it's crazy. Like, it would feel like they're gone, you know? Like, they could be dead. just no word from them, you know?
Yeah.
It's crazy. And then John Adams receives news that their letters have been thrown overboard. And in one letter that makes it, he tells her not to write anything that she wouldn't want to be published in a newspaper. And he writes that he's written her 50 letters and she's only received a handful of them. So that's so frustrating. I would be so mad if I wrote 50 letters and only like 3 made it, you know?
Yeah.
Ugh. He complains to her that people are writing to Ben Franklin, because he's in France too, but not to him. Yep, his frenemy. Like, people back in America, the congressmen and everything, they're writing things to Franklin about what's going on, but not to him, so he feels like he's in his shadow.
Yeah.
And John Adams was definitely not as popular as Ben Franklin in France. Ben Franklin was very charismatic and actually a flirt, I guess, which is
I think
weird.
I've heard that.
Yeah.
He was like slutty.
Yeah,
right?
But John Adams was much more uptight and prickly and like, let's get to work. So he was not as popular as Ben Franklin. But John Adams seemed to overall love France, actually. And he said in a letter, "As much as I respect this country, particularly the king and royal family, I could not help reflecting how many families in another country would this tallow make happy for life." So, like, animal fat. Basically just saying, there's so much richness here at Versailles and such. Like, I can't help thinking how this would go a long way somewhere else. So, he doesn't want that to happen in America. You know, they don't want to have a king that's having all these riches and such. He writes, "The king and queen," so Louis and Marie Antoinette, "are greatly beloved here." At this time they were. Every day shows fresh proof of it. On the other side of the channel, there's a king who's the opposite. So he means the King of England. But it's kind of ironic, sadly, because the English monarchy still exists to this day, and pretty soon in this story, the French monarchy is going to be overthrown. So it's interesting that he writes that. He mentions in a letter to her, February 79, "I grow fat here in France." And then that the English have published some of his letters and they're tearing him apart. Aww. They're making fun of him. They're calling him a fanatic, a bigot, awkward figure, uncouth dress, no character.
Oh, they're just looking for stuff.
I know.
Don't take it personally, John.
Also in February 79, he gets a little snippy with her in a letter and says, "For God's sake, never reproach me again with not writing or with writing scripts."
Oh, well, hey, I thought there's like the letters are getting lost.
I know.
Don't blame her.
I know, but I think she's still writing, being like, "Why haven't you written?" And he's like, "Stop saying that to me."
Yeah.
He was getting really paranoid, actually, though. During this time in France, he thought that there were spies all around, and there may have been French people giving information to the English or something like that. He was really stressed out at work. I don't think negotiations were working with France, and he started having panic attacks. He was just not doing well. June 79, Abigail writes that she hasn't heard from him in 6 months, which is crazy.
Oh my God.
I'm guessing these letters eventually make it because somehow we have them today. That same month that she says that, she gets a letter from that guy I mentioned earlier, James Lovell, and she writes really flirty-seeming things. She writes, it's going to be kind of flowery language, where she's like, "Do you love the natural sentiments of the heart? Take them then as they flow from the pen of Portia. Having been to take a ride this afternoon, upon my return, stopped at my brother... blah, 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 and he told me a gentleman from Boston had left a large package for me in the house. My heart bounded for joy. I besought him to deliver them instantly to me. The bulk of the packet ensured them a pressure to my bosom. My spirits danced. It was dark. I could not see the handwriting, but was in no doubt from whence they came." And then she continued. So basically, I guess he sent her a package and she held it to her bosom. And then she continues to write that she cried reading his letter.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. She's barely heard from her guy. She's lonely. She needs to, like, somehow get that same feeling. She's filling that void. Probably, I mean, we don't know, like, how far it went. Seems like it's just, like, a fantasy. But, like, it's probably just because she loves John so much and she misses him.
Yeah. I mean, we don't really know what the heck happened. It could have been just like a friendship or like slightly flirtation. I don't know. But it is understandable. You haven't heard from your husband in 6 months. Like, you can understand wanting a little love and excitement. And there's no record of John Adams ever flirting with anyone or anything. I mean, of course, we don't know.
Yeah.
But there's no reports of it. November 79, he finally returns home with his son, John Quincy Adams. And while home, he, I think, goes back to Philly again because he helps draft the Constitution. So, oh my God. And then he learns that Congress has appointed him to negotiate an end to the War of Independence again because it's still going on. So, 79, he sails back to France. November. So I guess he comes back and leaves again in the same month. I don't know how that's even possible. But he sails back. This time he brings John Quincy Adams and their son Charles. So he takes 2 of the sons. Their ship, I guess, was having problems, and they had to port in Spain for repairs, and then they had to make the torturous journey by land to Paris. And it took like a month or so. And there was even less communication this time. Summer 1780, he went to Amsterdam to get a loan for the American government and had the Netherlands recognize their country. And he was there in Amsterdam for a year.
No, with the boys?
So I think that the John Quincy Adams, I guess he might be an young teenager. I think he actually went to Russia. I don't know why. I think he was at least with Charles. May 25th, 1781, Abigail wrote, "I haven't heard from you in 8 months."
Oh my gosh.
I know. She's very anxious. Like, he could be dead. That's crazy. Like, how can you go 8 months without hearing from your spouse?
Yeah, I feel like you would just go crazy.
I know. I literally can't even imagine it. He returns to Paris July 1781, then back to Amsterdam, then to Paris. So, I don't know, he's just going back and forth, working on treaties between U.S., Britain, and France. December 81, he writes from Amsterdam to her, "If God should please to restore me once more to your fireside, I will never again leave it without your ladyship's company. No, not even to Congress to Philadelphia. I would give 1,000,000 sterling that you were here." And then, this is crazy. They decided that their son Charles should return to America, maybe because he keeps going back and forth between the countries and everything.
Yeah.
It's just not stable. And so they decided he's going to go alone
How old
back
is he?
to America. He is 11 years old.
Oh my gosh, way too young.
He was with a supervisor, like somebody that John knew, but still. The crazy thing is, though, they say, he has him go on the ship, goodbye, and then they don't hear from him for 4 months.
What? That's terrible. That's so scary. Was he supposed to arrive? He was supposed to arrive sooner,
probably like a month late. Yeah.
Where is he?
Apparently, there's a violent storm, and the ship got docked in Spain, but for some reason, they didn't leave again for months. I guess because it was winter and the weather was bad, but...
Oh, no.
I know.
Wait, that must have been so scary for him.
I know.
Like, I can't tell my mom where I am.
I know. He's only 11, and he's just with, like, some guy. I mean, I don't know how close he was to the supervisor. And... yeah, and poor Abigail, like, she's just back. Does she even know what's going on? She's just like, where's my son? What the heck? It's crazy what people went through back then.
Yeah, people were built differently. They really had to just, like, kind of put on a brave face.
I know.
I would be losing my mind. But they probably tell their neighbor about that, and they're like, oh, yeah, same thing happened.
Yeah, like, oh, something worse happened to me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Abigail, he did make it home, though, miraculously. Abigail wrote to John something along the lines of, which I thought that was kind of funny. This is funny. She wrote, basically, what if we just bought a woods retreat in Vermont?
Oh.
I just think it's funny that even over 200 years ago, Vermont was still a place that people would, like, run off to.
I know.
Some things never change. So, 1782, I read that guy that she had been maybe flirting with, James Lovell, I don't even know if this is true, but that had leaked indiscreet letters with Abigail Adams, and that he had an affair with his landlady.
Ooh.
A separate lady. So he stepped down from his role in Congress.
What a player.
I know. But interestingly, this threw me off. The historian John Smith claimed that Abigail endured flirtations with James Lovell just to get information from him since he was in government and her husband was so far away.
Oh.
Could this be true? But also, how does he know that?
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know. I feel like we're projecting that onto these people, but maybe that would be pretty ballsy of her.
Pretty saucy.
Yeah.
So then 1782, it's been 3 years since he's been in France, and Abigail writes that she can't take it anymore.
Yeah.
I'm going to come to Europe. And John writes that he is tenderly affected him, but no, I'm coming home.
Good.
And he wrote that he had no idea what he was still doing there, and that he had not heard from Congress in ages, and he's been waiting for them to tell him to return, but it almost seems like they forgot about him. So he says, that's it, I'm resigning. And he is worried in his letter. He says, I hope that my letter reaches you and that you won't sail to Europe because I'm going to sail back.
Oh my gosh. Did she go?
It sounds like a plot of a movie or novel.
I know.
Luckily, I think they made it in time. He did go back before she left, and they were reunited. But then they both went back to France together.
Good. I guess I don't know why that couldn't have happened all along.
I know. And they brought the other kids. And so the whole family is in Paris now. And they actually stay in Europe for 4 years together as a family.
Nice.
And thankfully, they were never separated like that again after this. I have no idea how they even got through that.
I know. It's crazy because, like, in the beginning, we're like, this is a very loving story. Like, it's a hopeful story, which it is. But it's like, gosh, they had to go through all this.
They really went through a lot. It's crazy.
But we've kind of talked about it before with long-distance relationships. Sometimes that longing for some people and some couples can almost, like, strengthen the relationship even more.
Yeah, I think so. 1788, they finally returned to Massachusetts, and John returned to his farming, but the nation's first presidential election was soon to take place. Oh, and just so you know, I actually don't really have much to say about the actual presidency, because it was all the letters, and now that they're reunited together, there will not be letters. And then since George Washington was widely expected to win the presidency, many felt that the vice president should go to a northerner, because he's from Virginia. And even though he didn't campaign or anything, John Adams was the primary contender because he had done a lot for the country. People knew about him. He basically negotiated the whole peace treaty in the end, so it was just assumed that he would be the vice president. And yeah, the way it worked back then was that the person with the most votes would be the president, and the second person with the second most votes would be the vice president. And Adams received 34 electoral college votes in the election, and he became the first vice president. And interestingly, in an effort to ensure that John Adams did not accidentally become president, Alexander Hamilton convinced at least 7 of the 69 electors to not cast their vote for Adams, because he wanted to make sure Washington won. And after he found out about this, Adams wrote to Benjamin Rush and said that the election was a curse rather than a blessing. Him and Alexander Hamilton were both Federalists, but they were both rivals and did not like each other.
It seems like he doesn't necessarily get along with everybody.
No, he didn't.
He's not here to make friends.
I think, interestingly, like, he was friends with some people, but he was competitive with them, and I think secretly didn't like them sometimes. Like, they may not, I think, like, even Ben Franklin might not have known how much he disliked him. And I think he was friends with some people that then they became enemies, like Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, so then he was the VP. Interestingly, they were trying to decide, since, you know, this was the very first president, they were trying to decide how they would address the president, and John Adams wanted to call him Highness or Excellency, but Thomas Jefferson said that was ridiculous, and then they agreed that they would call him Mr. President.
Yeah, that's classy. Mr. President.
I think that being in France that long kind of rubbed off on John Adams. He felt sort of useless as a vice president, and by the end of his term, he just sort of went along with whatever Washington wanted and was kind of quiet. But he did have the record for the most tie-breaking votes ever, which was basically all the VP did. But he had that record until recently. Kamala Harris actually broke it.
Oh, wow.
I know. So George Washington served 2 terms. He didn't want to do a third. He could have, but he just decided not to and stepped down. In 1789, there was another election, and John Adams, the Federalist nominee, received 71 votes and became president. He was 61 years old, and Abigail was 52. So he is the second president of the United States. Thomas Jefferson, who was a Democratic Republican, received 68 votes. So it was a really close election, actually. And he became the vice president.
It's kind of cute they used to do it that way. If you got second place, you became VP. I feel like that is kind of like a checks and balances. It's like, okay, like people still wanted the other guy. So
yeah,
like they'll still be, these two kind of have to work together now.
I know. I mean, some people say like it was hard to get things done in a way, but I kind of like it too. I wish there was like some way to work it out. I don't know.
They're now like on the same team, so it's like now they have
like
to
campaign
find
together.
Yeah.
They did sort of hate each other though. They used to be friends, but they had to work together. John Adams decided to retain Washington's cabinet because he thought that consistency would be a good thing, but it was a decision that he came to regret because of everybody's relationship to Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton and Adams did not like each other and did not agree on politics. And you get the sense that all throughout his presidency, Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson were actually like both trying to run the show, and they had their own followers, and John Adams was kind of in the middle. And people have said that his time in office was free of scandal, but there were conflicts during his presidency, which we don't have time to get into. But Abigail Adams, she took a pretty active role in politics, actually, unlike Martha Washington. And she was so politically active that her political opponents called her Mrs. President.
Aww.
I know. But like as if it was an insult. But we'll take it as a compliment today.
But yeah, you said political opponent.
Yeah, I know.
Mrs. President. Yeah.
It's like, oh, Mrs. President. But today,
yeah, that sounds endearing.
Cool. Yeah, I know. They moved into the White House in 1800. They were actually the first president and first lady to live in the White House. Strangely, when they were in the White House, John and Abigail had 3 mixed breed dogs named Mark, Juno, and Satan.
Satan?
Yeah.
Okay.
I read that originally Satan was named Peter, but I'm guessing he was a bad dog or something.
He must have been.
So they called him Satan.
That's so funny. I feel like if that happened today, it would be a political scandal. And the opponents would be like, damn, they're like some freaky people.
I know.
They're a part of a conspiracy.
I know. It's weird. They also had 2 horses, Cleopatra and Caesar.
That's so cute.
His VP, Thomas Jefferson, tried to undermine him throughout his whole presidency. That is bad. Like, you don't want your vice president doing that.
Yeah, that is true. That would actually be not productive.
Yeah. And then Thomas Jefferson won the next election. So John Adams only served 1 term. And adding to the agony, their son Charles actually died around this time, November 30th, of alcoholism. So and that's the son that was actually left behind in Spain years ago.
You wonder if like the trauma of like being
I do wonder.
Lost.
Yeah. Abigail had already left the White House because this happened, so she wanted to get back to Massachusetts. And the inauguration for the new president was happening, and he was anxious to join her. I think he was also super upset how it all went down and hated Thomas Jefferson. So on the morning of Jefferson's inauguration, John Adams departed the White House at the pre-dawn hours, like 4 in the morning or something, and did not attend his inauguration.
Wow.
And he's only one of 5 outgoing presidents to not have attended the inauguration.
Does that
including Donald Trump?
Yeah. And does that also include the ones who have passed away?
No, that's not included, actually. Yeah. So of the presidents that were still alive when another president was being sworn in, there's only been 5 that didn't attend the inauguration, and John Adams is one of them.
I think it's, like, really not classy to not go. I do like when people are...
It's not.
Like, they shake their hand and they wish them luck.
A peaceful transition of power,
exactly.
as they say.
It's one of the bedrocks of our democracy.
Yeah, John was not willing to do that. Early 1801, John sent Thomas Jefferson a brief note wishing him a happy and prosperous presidency, though. But I guess Thomas Jefferson never responded, and they did not speak to each other again for 12 years. But in 1804, unknown to John Adams, to her husband, Abigail wrote to Jefferson because his daughter had died, and she had stayed with the Adams in London in the past, and they wrote back and forth to each other at first kind of sweetly, but then it turned into political fighting.
That's sad.
Jefferson didn't answer her fourth letter.
Yeah.
So John and Abigail returned to Massachusetts. John Adams returned to his farming. Their son, John Quincy Adams, was elected to the Senate in 1803. In 1818, Abigail Adams died at the age of 74 of typhoid. And then in 1825, their son, John Quincy Adams, was elected president. And John Adams himself died July 4th, 1826. On the 50th anniversary of signing the Declaration of Independence.
That's so crazy.
Isn't that crazy?
He must have been pretty old when he died.
Yes, he was 91 years old.
Wow. At that time period, that's crazy.
I know. And what's even more wild, apparently his last words, among his last words, I don't think it was his actual last words, but he said, Thomas Jefferson survives. Oh. But he was unaware that Jefferson had died several hours before. So they both died on the 4th of July.
Wait, I'm getting
50th anniversary. I know, isn't that crazy?
Did he know that Thomas Jefferson was sick?
No, I think he thought he was doing fine. So he was kind of like, damn him, he survives, but he died that day too.
I don't like that. That's like creepy to me.
Really? I think I wrote in my notes, God is real.
Oh yeah, I guess so. But
I thought it was so cool.
I know, that is so crazy. But like after the whole like crossing out that letter in the book, like I'm a little scared.
Oh, no, I think that was just somebody being annoying. Like maybe they had read it somewhere else where it was written differently or something, and they were just like, no, this isn't right, or like I don't know why they did that. But
yeah,
I was actually not creeped out by the crossing out. I just thought it was someone being a busybody or something.
That's true.
Pretty crazy.
Wow.
I guess the Liberty Bell was rung in their honor that day.
That must have been a crazy day for the country. I guess I don't know what news was like back then, like how quickly you found out, but it's like I feel like you'd be like, oh my God, you hear Thomas Jefferson died? No, it's actually John Adams. No, like they both died on July 4th, no less.
It's crazy.
Wow.
How does that happen?
On the 50th anniversary.
I know.
Wow. Yeah, God is real in that situation. That's crazy.
That is John and Abigail Adams.
Wow.
Whew. I didn't even mention that I went to their house the other day.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I was in Boston anyway, and it was only like a 15-minute drive from where I was going, so I was like, I should just go. So I went. I didn't go inside. You can go inside, but you needed to book like a tour. But I just walked around, and it was really cool. It felt kind of mystical and magical to be there.
That's cute. After this episode, I want to go there too.
I really want to go inside. I would love to do that. And it was cool. There was this rose tree that it said was planted by Abigail Adams.
Wow.
I was like, whoa.
To see it's still there.
It was so long ago.
Can you walk around inside?
You can, yeah. You just need to book a tour. I think it's the kind of thing where they only run tours if you book it. If that makes sense. There wasn't someone just waiting there to like, all right, we're starting a tour. Like, I had somewhere to be, so but I would love to go back and go inside. Yeah, it was really cool. Made me a little sad because I feel like you can imagine when you're there, because they still have somewhat large grounds there. It's like they have all these trees and hill and the garden and everything, but you can kind of imagine that it used to be like a lot more countryside, but now it's like right by a highway, so
I know.
It's like, oh. But it's kind of cool because you can kind of imagine what it was like back then. Yeah. Anyway, that was John and Abigail.
Wow. We really haven't covered American history in that way before. That was so interesting. I love that we have those letters.
Me too. I love Love that kind of thing. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah, thank you, Kelly.
That was a lot.
Ooh, can you hint our next episode?
Next week is totally different. As always. Next week is about a couple from the 2010s.
Okay.
And 2 actors. One of the people in the relationship we mentioned in the Miley and Liam episode. That might be a huge spoiler.
2 episodes ago.
I gotta say, I feel like these 4 episodes this month are so us.
What do you mean by that?
Okay, the first one was like a Disney adjacent thing. Then we had like a modernish, intriguing kind of scandal, newsworthy thing.
But like a little bit more niche.
Yeah, and then, yes. Kind of like Gypsy Rose or the TJ and Amy.
Yeah.
And then we had like a 1700s one. And then we have a 2010s, something I loved in high school. Like, I don't know. It's just very us.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's next week. And
did we even mention that we were mentioned in The Guardian?
No, we didn't.
Yeah. Which was a huge surprise.
Yes, so cool.
But
just mentioned in an article.
They were like some historical couples, some stuff for millennials.
Yep. Thanks to The Guardian. Thank you guys for listening.
Yeah. And we'll get back
together next week.
Is your heart filled with pain? Shall I come back again? Tell